makes me want to holler, go away. I need more peace and hope and love. Where do I find it in this crazy old world? I need strategies, strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio. Every time I listen, Lauren and David share strategies for living, and it makes me aware. I got strategies for living, strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab.
Oh, you know we need them. Yeah, we need those strategies, don't we? Those strategies for living. So are you ready? You ready for your daily dose of radio rehab?
Oh, ready or not, I think the change is a-coming.
Oh, you know of which you speak. Hey, folks, welcome. Welcome into another edition of Strategies for Living. I'm Dr. David McMillian. She is psychotherapist, PLPC Lauren Leon McMillian. And Lauren, I've been thinking about caterpillars and butterflies recently.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's just the way I think sometimes.
Follow the butterflies.
Think about this. I want to think about this. A caterpillar actually dissolves.
Completely.
Dissolves inside the chrysalis and builds a brand new
body from each
brand
cell.
new brain, brand new wings,
Yep.
legs. But here's the deal.
Yeah.
They're not alone.
No.
Butterflies are not alone. Poisonous frogs in jungle canopies, to immortal jellyfish in frigid ocean depths.
Well, and I think
Three quarters of all animal species undergo dramatic metamorphosis.
Yeah. Well, and I think we can talk to our life strategist today, but I think he might agree that so do we on some level, right?
I think that's, Oren Harman is our life strategist today. He's got a brand new, beautiful book out. It's called Metamorphosis. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we have a lot of great life strategists on Strategies for Living.
Yeah.
But, when you think about change and when you think about the importance of change,
it's the only constant.
And aligning with life, well, then you've got to think about and talk about what Oren Harman is talking about, and that's metamorphosis. So I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to this conversation with him today. This is going to be good.
Absolutely, I think.
And his book is great.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And
you got to go get it.
Contemplation for the times.
But we'll talk about that. We've got lots, obviously, to talk about today here on Strategies for Living. Folks, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you joining us on Strategies, and we appreciate our sponsors who make it all possible. The Robinson Film Center, and Azalea Cleaners, and Pintail Roofing, and Learning RX. We train your brain. The Balance Life Wellness Center, Fertitta's Delicatessen, home of the Godfather, Alligator Italian Sausage, and some pretty good muffies too. Uprising Addiction Center, and Mira Direct Primary Care. Back in a moment, we're going to meet life strategist Oren Harman today. Metamorphosis here on Strategies for Living. Be right back.
Tune in daily, find the light. Healthy mind and spirits bright. Strategies for living strong. Feel the vibe, it won't go wrong. Body moves and soul align. Catch the rhythm, feel the time. Radio rehab every day. Chase those clouds of gray away. Your daily dose of radio rehab. Lift you up when skies seem drab. Mind and body, spirits free. Living life in harmony.
And welcome into Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillian, David McMillian. Let's welcome into the program now Oren Harman. He is Senior Research Fellow at the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute. He teaches at the graduate program in science, technology, and society at Bar Ilan University. His books include Evolutions and The Price of Altruism, which won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. He lives both in Berlin and Jerusalem. Got a new book. We've been talking about it. It's out from Basic Books. It's beautiful. Metamorphosis. Oren Harman, welcome to Strategies for Living, Professor.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be talking to you in Louisiana because I have a beloved uncle who lives in New Orleans, in Metairie. I hope he's listening too.
I hope so too.
Just down the road.
Yeah, just down the road. So you get to New Orleans some and get fed well, huh?
Oh, no question. I love my gumbo. Yes, getting crawfish and everything. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, Oren, this is a unique book. When I got it in and looked at it, I said, "Wow, I don't think I've seen anything quite like this before." What was the process that you went through?
What was your metamorphosis?
What was your metamorphosis to write Metamorphosis?
Well, it's almost as if the subject chose me. I didn't choose the subject. And I'll tell you why. My wife emerged from a shower one evening with a white plastic stick with 2 pink lines on it and announced that she was pregnant. We were pregnant for the 3rd time.
Wow.
And that evening, that very night, I had a first dream about a childhood dry aquarium that I used to own when I was a boy, in which I would rear butterflies, caterpillars, and watch them disappear into a chrysalis, and then try to see them in live time emerging wondrously as beautiful butterflies outside of, from the chrysalis.
Right.
And I just began having those dreams again and again and again. They were recurring dreams, day after day after day. And so I said to myself, maybe there's some connection between the impending birth of our 3rd child and metamorphosis that I should be studying, that I should explore. And so I jumped down that rabbit hole, and that was about 6 or 7 years ago. It's been a wonderful journey. It took me to Germany and to Italy and to a small island in Orca waters in the North Pacific, to a lab where I worked for some time. And it turns out that the metamorphosis, although most of us think of it, when we think of it, we think about butterflies and caterpillars and tadpoles and frogs, but it's 3/4 of all species.
That blows me away.
Really, it's a subject that allows us to think as humans about the meaning of change in our own lives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, you highlight some remarkable examples from jellyfish to axolotls. Which species surprised you the most during your research? And what did it teach you about?
Well, I'm totally in love with. Sorry?
I was just going to ask, what did it teach you about nature in general and human nature?
Okay. I'm in love with the axolotl. The axolotl, the Mexican axolotl. These are these wonderful salamanders that live in the highlands, in lakes in the highlands of Mexico. And they're really nature's version of Peter Pan because they do not forego their final metamorphosis. They actually stay young. And so they have these frilly, dragon-like lungs that are external lungs. They're actually gills.
Right.
Had they gone through their last metamorphosis, those would have been subsumed into the body and turned into lungs just like yours and mine. But they retain them all of their lives. They don't go through their last metamorphosis. And for that reason, they gain superpowers. In particular, they can regenerate almost anything that is hurt in their body. So they can regenerate a limb, but they can also regenerate a heart and even
Whoa.
parts of their brain.
Mm-hmm.
So we study them in order to, to unlock secrets that will help us stay young,
Right.
help us become Peter Pans, just like the axolotl.
Yeah. What? Why haven't more? Why hasn't this been? I'm sure science has studied it, but why don't we talk about it more? In fact, I mean, it's like, in a sense, Metamorphosis is a great mystery. Again, I'm sure not because it hasn't been and isn't being studied, but why aren't we talking about it more?
I was surprised when I jumped into the rabbit hole that there were so few books about this subject, because, as we said, 3/4 of all animal creatures, animal species, that's a remarkable number.
Yes, it is.
And indeed, I agree with you. I think, we do science for many reasons. We do science in order to create better drugs that will help us live longer lives and beat out diseases. And we do it so we have cheaper electronics and more efficient agriculture. And we also do it to find something that we call truth.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the reasons to do science is also to encounter metaphors in the natural and the physical world that help us explain ourselves to ourselves.
Yeah.
There's a great line in John Steinbeck's book, The Log from the Sea of Cortez from 1951, in which he says that the greatest danger for the speculative biologist is analogy, making analogies between humans and other creatures, that these parallels are amusing when it comes to the creatures, and that they're downright valuable as regards the humans. So there's such a plethora of examples of different ways of changing in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when we study these different ways of changing, we can learn something about our own relationship to change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I wrote the book. And
Yeah.
I hope that, we talk about it more and more.
The
It's
thing,
very, very rich.
Yeah.
It
I'll
is-
give you
it
just
is
one
very
natural
rich.
example. I'll give you another example, which is really mind-boggling. A starfish.
Yeah.
So a starfish, like every other creature, starts life out as an egg. And then it develops into a tiny little larva, which is translucent, and it has wings. It looks like a little flapping angel flapping in the midwaters. It's a swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point in this creature's development, a second developmental program kicks in its tummy and begins to create the adult. And the adult looks like a starfish, what you and I know to be a starfish. In other words, it's pigmented, it has color, it has radial symmetry, often 5 arms. And this adult in the tummy of the juvenile migrates to the tips of the juvenile. And then, like this wonderful natural moment, almost like an immaculate conception, they part with a kiss. And the adult falls down to the seabed, where it becomes a kind of benthic hunter. And the juvenile continues its flapping, swimming life in the midwaters. Now, what's the relationship between these two creatures? Is one the parent of the other? No. Are they siblings? No. Are they cousins? No. Actually, they are an identity. And even though they have no interest with one another, once they part ways, every cell in these two very disparate-looking creatures has the exact same DNA. So they are an identity. And in human terms, it would almost be as if a teenager gave birth to its own adult self and then continued to live alongside its adult self simultaneously.
Yeah, well, I can
So
see
this is very generative.
I can see many ways where that actually happens metaphorically, right? Don't we all carry an inner teenager?
Yeah, some more than others.
Some more than others, but it's in one body. Imagine you gave birth to and imagine you could be an adult and actually stay a young teenager simultaneously. You could live both lives.
Yeah.
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 What would that be like?
Oh, wow.
Well, that would be a rich life, I think.
Yeah. And one of the things I want people to understand about Metamorphosis is that there's nothing boring about this book.
No.
And let me just tease a little bit here. You got my attention right away. One of the first things I do when I get a new book in, Oren, is I open up to the table of contents, if there is one. Generally there is. And I, scan it. And what jumped out right away at me from your book is part 1 is where do we come from? Part 2 is where are we going? And part 3 is what is the self?
Mm.
And then I look at some very provocative chapter names like, the transfiguration of Jesus to Christ. And, immortal jellyfish, all the way to the molecular trinity. So, there's something in here that will teach you, obviously, but there's a lot in here that will entertain you. Metamorphosis. Oren Harman, our life strategist today, here on Strategies for Living. We're learning a lot, and we've got a lot more to learn, so don't go away. Stay right where you are. More strategies to come.
Facing the same old problems day to day makes you wanna holler, get away. Looking for the road that'll get me there, looking for hope and peace to spare. Looking for strategies. Strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio.
We got a few strategies here. Welcome back in to Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillian, David McMillian, with Oren Harman, our life strategist today, the author of Metamorphosis. Got to go get this book at your favorite bookseller, wherever you buy books, and I hope you will.
All right, Oren. So we've already covered, of course, that 3/4 of species literally undergo what we biologically call metamorphosis. And you've kind of hinted at the idea that there is a great metaphor and analogy in that, perhaps for us as humans. What is your take on how we as humans might undergo something like, or perhaps what is metamorphosis?
Yeah, so the definition of metamorphosis is dramatic post-embryonic development. In other words, it's everything that happens after birth.
Okay.
And there needs to be some really dramatic change, so dramatic that you can't tell if it's the same creature or not in different parts of the life cycle. But off the bat, you notice that there's something very fuzzy about this definition, because how dramatic does dramatic have to be
Right.
to count as metamorphic? And also, who gets to decide?
Mm-hmm.
Who's sitting in judgment on this question? So we don't count ourselves, us humans, as metamorphic. And maybe that's why we've invented Superman and the Transformers. We feel like we may need such creatures in our lives. But we are indeed, when we think about our own development, we do undergo dramatic post-embryonic development, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that when you look at biologically at different genes and different hormones that play a role in our development from the time we're fetuses in our mommy's womb, you see that these are the self-same genes and hormones that play a role in the metamorphosis of an insect or of an ancient medusa or an ancient lamprey from a ocean 360 million years ago in the Devonian age. So biologically, we kind of live on a continuum with all the rest of the creatures on the planet. We try to separate ourselves from these creatures, but we're part of the same tree.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll tell you a story. This is kind of a sad story, but it has a happier ending. There was a boy, a 14-year-old by the name of Evan Miller, who murdered his neighbor in a trailer park in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And an Alabama court gave him life without parole. His lawyers took the case to the Supreme Court of the United States, and it became known as Miller v. Alabama. They sat in judgment in 2012 over this case. And the lawyers brought amicus curiae by the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, showing that adolescent brains were just not the same as adult brains. The pruning hadn't happened. The axons hadn't been myelinated. The brain really hadn't arranged itself.
Right.
And that for that reason, you couldn't treat an adolescent in the same way that you treat an adult. An adolescent was sort of like a Ferrari with no brakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for that reason, you had to think morally differently about how you were going to punish actions that, transgressed the law.
Mm.
And so we appeal to biology in order to help us answer moral questions about how we should run our societies and how we should look at different stages in our lives. The biology counts for us. So even though we don't figure ourselves metamorphic creatures, we're very much aware of the great developments that we go through. And we may not develop so dramatically externally, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, or a larvae of a starfish turning into a starfish. But we do change on the inside very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All of us know that. We're changing all the time. Change is the lifeblood of our existence, of the existence of any living creature.
Mm-hmm.
And so can we learn something about how we negotiate our relationship to change by looking at other creatures? That is a big question. We're very ambivalent about change. We look in the mirror. Everyone is aware of this situation, will recognize this moment. You look in the mirror and you say, wait a second, am I the same person that I was yesterday or last week or a year ago or 10 years ago?
Yeah.
And we bemoan the passing of time, but we also praise the wisdom that comes with wrinkles when we look in the mirror.
Yeah. So,
we celebrate the flower when it arrives, but we also bemoan the rotting fruit. And they are, part and parcel of one another. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So, science, obviously you think evolution, right? And metamorphosis is, I'm going to put this in air quotes, expensive.
Yeah.
It's an expensive process to creatures as they undergo it. I mean, again, the caterpillar dissolves in order to, so from an evolutionary point of view, how in the world how does metamorphosis happen when it is so, quote unquote, expensive to creatures who are undergoing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to some degree, it remains a mystery. It's sort of similar. I wrote a book some years ago about the evolution of altruism. And it's similar in a way to that problem. Altruism, an altruist in nature, and an amoeba can be an altruist. You don't need a brain to be an altruist. It's any creature that acts in a way that provides a fitness benefit to another while incurring a fitness cost is an altruist. And Darwin himself asked the question, well, if evolution is a game of survival of the fittest, how could a trait that reduces fitness have evolved? Why wasn't it booted out by the ruthless boot of natural selection?
Right.
Same goes for metamorphosis. As you said, it's extremely expensive, both in, reconstructing yourself and
Right.
reprogramming your brain, rewiring it, killing cells, growing new ones, and also in time and in vulnerability. A metamorphosing creature is very vulnerable.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So why did it happen? One answer, which is a kind of general answer, is that it reduces competition between generations. So if you're a caterpillar that eats a particular plant, and that's the only plant that you eat, and then you disappear into a chrysalis and emerge as a creature with wings who can fly elsewhere and eat other things, then your adult self will not compete with your juvenile self.
Okay.
Okay.
So by transforming yourself, you actually lessen the competition that you will have with yourself
Interesting.
throughout your life.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What did those Greeks have to say about metamorphosis? The ancient Greeks. What did they think of metamorphosis?
Well, Aristotle believed that there were perfect and imperfect creatures on the planet. And the most perfect of all creatures were humans. But then there were creatures like insects that were born imperfect. In other words, they were born not themselves. And they would need to go through a second transformation to become who they are. So in Aristotle's time, people believed that it was the male who brought the essence of the creature. Aristotle didn't see insects have sex. And so because he didn't recognize fathers, he thought that the young could not have had an essence given to them by their fathers, and so would need to go through a second transformation, which for him was a spontaneous generation. Now, what's funny is that he actually did observe insects having sex. So what's going on here? Well, if you remember that Aristotle also thought that women have less teeth in their mouth than men do, then the mystery begins to unlock. Because from our modern perspective, we sort of want to shout out to the great Aristotle, why didn't you just ask your mother or your wife to open their mouth and count the teeth, and you would have seen that we actually have the exact same number. This is an example of how social and cultural mores, in this case, what is the essence of being a woman or a female, and what is the essence of being a male, how these cultural mores can be so strong that they can really impact what you can think and even what you can see. They can trump your own observations of the world because they're so strongly ingrained in the culture. So this was the ancient Greeks. But if you run ahead to the early Christians, early modern Christians, when they looked at metamorphosis, they saw the transfiguration of Jesus into Christ. It was sort of an earthly reminder to humans that deliverance was possible.
Yeah.
And so the good God had put the butterflies on the planet in order to remind us that we can be delivered. We can be saved.
I love it.
And then, of course, into the modern era, we looked at the same phenomenon of metamorphosis, but we tried to unlock it using genes and hormones and molecular pathways.
There is so much here. Wow. The only caution that I will give you folks about metamorphosis is
prepare to be changed.
Prepare to be well, and it's going to be hard to put it down.
Yeah.
That's the deal. Oren Harman, our life strategist today, here on Strategies for Living. We've got more to learn, more to come. Stay with us.
We all have problems every day. We all need help along the way. Strategies for living radio.
And welcome back. Welcome back in to Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillian, David McMillian. Fascinating conversation we're having today with Oren Harman, the author of a fantastic book, Metamorphosis. And you can find it wherever you buy books. You find it at your favorite bookseller out from Basic Books, and I hope you will find it. You know, I'm thinking, how would you really got my brain cells rocking along here? Do butterflies remember when they dissolved as caterpillars? Is there memory there, Oren?
It's a wonderful question, because when a caterpillar disappears into a chrysalis, for many years, for centuries, we had no idea what was happening inside that chrysalis.
Right.
You know, all you knew is you pricked it with a pin, and sort of, you know, this kind of oozy green-yellow liquid came out.
Right.
So we didn't really know what the mystery was inside, but today we have microtomography cameras that can actually show us what's happening at every single moment. And what we've learned is that it's actually an exquisitely choreographed developmental progression. It's like a symphony where things are being rewired, the brain in particular, and cells are being reprogrammed. And for that reason, it's a good question to wonder, wait a second, if the butterfly has a completely rewired brain, does it retain memories from the time it was a caterpillar munching on leaves? And the answer to that question seems to be yes, it does retain memories. How do we know? Well, if you give an odor to a caterpillar, you let it smell an odor, and at the same time you give it a little shock while it's smelling the odor. Well, when it becomes a butterfly, it'll stay away from that odor. It will have learned that it shouldn't approach that odor. So there's some sort of memory there, even though the brain has been completely rewired. Now, funnily enough, with flies, that's not the case. Maggots do not, flies don't remember anything from the time that they were maggots. So you could ask the scientific question, well, what's the difference? Why does the butterfly have memory and the fly not have memory? And there have been scientists who have offered solutions to that mystery. Some of them believe that it's really a numbers game, that the number of neurons that have been rewired and the number of neurons that have an ancestry in their cell lineage in the juvenile, that's what's going to determine whether or not you have memories from the time you were a different creature. So in human terms, this is really interesting, because for us, memory is really a big part of identity. When we lose our memories, we don't know who we are. We don't have a past. We can't figure out who we are.
Yeah.
So the butterfly teaches us that this could be that the answer to this can be really very specific, biologically, really, really specific, having to do with how neurons are wired in the brain. There's a philosopher, an Oxford philosopher by the name of Galen Strawson, who talks about a divide among humans. He says humans fall into one of two categories. They're either narrative or they're episodic. So narrative people tell a story about their lives. They say, I was born in Jerusalem and I studied in Oxford and then I moved back to Israel and I met my wife and I had 3 kids. Right. And that's the story that they tell themselves and that they tell others, and it kind of constitutes their identity for them.
Yeah.
But then there are people who are episodic. They They don't tell this story to themselves or to others. They live in the moment. They don't really have a history which is very salient for creating their own self-understanding and self-identity. Now, I mentioned that Galen Strawson talks about this, and he says about himself, I'm episodic. My past doesn't really play a big role in who I am today. But he had a father, and his father was also a philosopher from Oxford. And the father was famous for arguing that free will was real, whereas the son became famous for arguing that free will is a fiction. So a discerning biographer, looking at the life of this Galen Strawson, could imagine putting him on a biographical arc that has to do with where he came from and his relationship to his father, even if the young Strawson says about himself that his life is disjointed. So we humans, we're storytelling creatures, even when the story that we tell is that we don't have a story to tell.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting.
Does all of this, we've only got about 2.5 minutes left, but does all of that we're talking about here and all that you discuss in the book, we've already mentioned this earlier, change is difficult, change is hard. Does all of that we're talking about today give us some insight into why change is so hard for us?
I think that we tend to think of change as a form of ending. And endings are difficult. They are a form of saying goodbye. But looking at the myriad examples of change in nature allows us to see and might be able to teach us is that while change marks endings, it also marks beginnings and continuation. And we think of metamorphosis as something very dramatic, but nature teaches us that it's always preceded by a slow and highly choreographed and often invisible preparation. So it might feel very shocking to us when we change, but it's actually always happening. It's always happening. And for that reason, it's something that we should learn to live with some degree of equanimity and also an ability to take solace from. It's a natural part of growing.
Yeah.
I truly wish that we had about 3-4 more hours because and we'd stretch that, but we don't. So what I'm going to ask people to do is to continue the conversation with Oren Harman by going and getting a copy of the book, Metamorphosis, at your favorite bookseller. And we'll be back. We'll be back to wrap up our conversation today with Oren Harman here on Strategies for Living. What a great life strategist. Yeah. Go get this book, Metamorphosis. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillian, David McMillan, and Oren Harman. Metamorphosis. Great book. Got to go get this book. Oren, I wish we had another couple of hours. We don't. So I'm going to ask you, what do you want people to take away from, we've had a great conversation here today. What do you want people to take away from what we've talked about today?
Don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid of change. It's a natural part of our living cycle as creatures on this planet that share the tree of life with many other millions of creatures. When we look at photos of our kids when they were babies, and then when they grew up and they were teenagers and into life, then often we look at their faces and it seems like they're becoming themselves ever more, all the time, becoming more themselves. We can see that when we look at others, but it's difficult for us to see that when we look at ourselves.
Yeah.
But I think that what Metamorphosis teaches us is that transformation is always a kind of return to self.
Mm-hmm.
And it holds in it the promise of returning to a better self.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, don't be afraid of change, embrace it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for being a great life strategist. And folks, thank you. We appreciate you being with us, and we appreciate our sponsors who make it all possible. The Robinson Film Center, and Azalea Cleaners, and Pintail Roofing, and Learning RX, We Train Your Brain, and the Balanced Life Wellness Center, and Fertitta's Delicatessen, home of the Godfather, Alligator Italian Sausage, pretty good Muffies too, Uprising Addiction Center, and Mira Direct Primary Care. If today were the last day of your life, you only had one more phone call that you could make, who would you call? And what would you say? And why are you waiting? Make the call. For Oren Harman, for Lauren Leon McMillian, I'm David McMillian. See you next time right here on Strategies for Living.